Hello and welcome back to step-by-step-guitar-tuition.com. This is the fifth lesson in the Step 4 module, and in this lesson we're going to look at improvising over chord progressions using some of the 2-octave scales that I showed you at the beginning of this step. And also I'm going to introduce a new lead guitar technique called slurring. As always, it's important that you're familiar with all the 2-octave scales that we've looked at so far before you continue with this lesson. So if you feel that you haven't yet mastered those scales, I'd recommend going back to the beginning of this step just to recap. Improvising is a key skill for guitarists, and it's also good fun. Because you're still fairly new to improvising, I'm going to keep it simple and gradually throw in more lead guitar techniques as we progress through the step-by-step syllabus. Don't forget to refer to your lesson notes for more useful information. Before we begin, I'll demonstrate the new lead guitar technique that's going to feature in this lesson. This technique is called slurring, and the name is a description of the sound that's produced when you play 2 or more notes of a scale in sequence without actually plucking the second note, or even without plucking any notes at all. To demonstrate this, I'll use 2 notes from the A minor pentatonic scale, the 5th fret on the 4th string and the 7th fret on the 4th string. Start by plucking those 2 notes in sequence like this: 5th fret, 7th fret, 5th, 7th. Now try plucking the 5th fret, and with your 3rd finger poised over the 7th fret, hit the string firmly with a hammer action. So pluck and hammer, pluck and hammer, pluck and hammer. Let me show you that in close-up. Okay, so you can see that if you hit the string hard enough with your finger, this will cause the string to vibrate from the 7th fret and a note is produced. Pluck and hammer. Don't worry if you don't get it straight away, it'll get better with practice. This is known as a hammer-on because you're sounding the note by hammering your finger onto the string, and it's the hammer impact that sounds the note. A guitarist will use this technique to produce a smooth, slurred sound, as opposed to the more rigid sound of plucking the 2 notes. Let's try it again. Pluck and hammer. Pluck and hammer. Pluck, hammer. Okay, so now that you know how to do a hammer-on, let's try the opposite slurring technique, which is called a pull-off. This time I'm going to play the 7th fret on the 4th string, followed by the 5th fret on the 4th string. But instead of plucking the 5th, I'll use my 3rd finger of my fretting hand to sound the note by pulling down and off the string, like this. Pluck, and pull your finger down and off the string. And again, pluck, pull down and off the string. Make sure that your first finger is in position holding down the 5th fret, and also make sure that you pull down so that your finger actually plucks the string as it pulls off, like this. Pluck, pull down, pluck and down. Let me show you that in close-up. Don't worry if you don't get the hang of that technique straight away, it'll get better with practice. This is known as a pull-off because you're sounding the note by pulling your finger off the string. In effect, you're actually plucking the string with the fingers of your fretting hand instead of your plectrum. A guitarist will use this technique to produce a smooth, slurred sound as opposed to the more rigid sound of plucking the 2 notes. Let's try it again. Pluck and pull off. Pluck, pull off. Before we begin improvising, let's try playing the full 2-octave minor pentatonic scale using the slurring technique that we've been looking at. So I'm going to start at the 5th fret on the low E string, pluck the note, and then instead of plucking the 8th fret, hammer your fourth finger onto the 8th fret, like this. Pluck and hammer. And then on the next string, play the 5th fret, pluck, hammer on the 7th, 5th fret, pluck, hammer on the 7th, 5th fret again on the next string, hammer on the 7th, 5th, hammer onto the 8th with your 4th finger, and then the last note. And then working backwards down the scale, start from the top string, 5th fret, pluck, then play the 8th fret on the 2nd string and pull off to the 5th. 7th note on the 3rd string, pull off to the 5th. 7th fret on the 4th string, pull off to the 5th. 7th fret on the 5th string, pull off to the 5th. Then 8th fret, pull off to the 5th again. I'll do that one more time, all the way up and down again. 5, hammer on. 5, hammer to 7. 5, hammer 7. 5, hammer to 7. 5, hammer on to 8. 5 on the top, and then down. 8, pull off to 5. 7, pull off to 5. 7, pull off to 5. 7, pull off to 5. 8, pull off to 5. And practice that slowly and smoothly. Back down. Now let's try to incorporate that slurring technique into our improvising. For this first exercise we'll use a 2-octave A minor pentatonic scale over the following chord sequence, which you'll find in your lesson notes. The chord sequence is A minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, D minor 7, A minor 7, E minor 7 and 2 bars on F major 7. I'd recommend concentrating on small groups of notes within the scale and see how many different phrases you can think of before moving on to a different cluster of notes within the scale. One of the good things about improvising with pentatonic scales is that you don't have to think too much about which note you select, like you do if you were using a major scale or a natural minor scale. You have more freedom and just let yourself go. For this first exercise I'm going to use 4 notes. I'm going to use the top note of the minor pentatonic, the 8th fret on the 2nd string, the 5th fret on the 2nd string and the 7th fret on the 3rd string. And also I'm going to include some slurs. For example, I'll hammer on from the 5th to the 8th and pull off from the 8th to the 5th. Remember, you can play the notes in any order and you can repeat notes and you can play as fast or as slow as you like. So let's see what happens. For this second example, using the same scale, I'm going to use a different cluster of notes. The notes I'll use this time are the 7th fret on the 3rd string, the 5th fret on the 3rd string, the 7th fret on the 4th string, and the 5th fret on the 4th string. Also, I'll include slurs between the 5th and 7th frets on the 3rd and 4th strings. So I'll do a hammer on from a 5 to 7, a pull off, a hammer on from 5 to 7 on the 4th string, and a pull off. Okay, let's see what happens. For this next example, I'm going to use the low notes of the scale. I'll also include the slurs between the 5th and 7th on the A string and the 5th and 8th on the E string. So this time I'm going to use just the bottom 4 or 5 notes of the scale, putting in slurs between the 5th and the 8th and the 5th and the 7th. Hammer-ons, pull-off, hammers, pulls. Okay, let's see what happens this time. Okay, lastly, let's try mixing it all up using the whole 2-octave scale and including slurs. Try to vary your phrases, fast and slow, and don't be afraid to leave gaps or rests between phrases. Let's have a go. So that was an introduction to improvising with 2-octave scales and including slurs. As we progress through the step-by-step syllabus, you'll learn more lead guitar techniques which you can use to add interest to your improvising. You can find the chord sequences that we've played over today in the notes that accompany this lesson. Also, you can find longer versions of the backing tracks to improvise over on the step-by-step website. Or why not make up your own and record your own sequences for a bit of extra chord practice. I look forward to seeing you in lesson 6, where I'll show you how to use percussive mute strokes to add interest to your strumming technique. Until then, happy improvising.